later.
Well, good afternoon. Let me welcome you. My name is Phil Beckhardt. I'm the president of the Friends of the New York State Library, and we're very happy to welcome you to this program this afternoon, which promises to be a very interesting one. And we're so pleased with the very large turnout. I'm glad that the snow has stopped for a few days at least. Before we really get the program underway, I will just call your attention to the fact that the event is sponsored by the Friends of the New York State Library, jointly with the New York State Library. And we have some of our Friends of the State Library newsletters, in case you're not familiar with the State Library. The Friends of the State Library, we are a group that does all that we can to support the New York State Library and to encourage increased resources for the library, and we're always looking for new members and new participants. So there's, in each of the newsletters, there's a form for joining. There are wonderful membership benefits should you decide to join, and we hope that you do. And sponsoring events like this is one of the things we do throughout the year, and there are additional benefits of membership, such as bookstore discounts and other access to state library resources. So we will invite you to consider joining us. That's a good group and with a good cause, as I'm sure you all know, supporting the state library. Let me now turn the podium over to Mary Redmond, who is the director of the state library. She will further us along towards the main event.
Thank you, Phil, and welcome to the New York State Library. It's a wonderful opportunity for us to be here to celebrate the work of a great author and independent researcher, and to hear from a panel of experts who are familiar with her work. If I could put in a plug for the New York State Library, and I see a lot of familiar faces, so I hope you're all familiar with us. But we're very pleased that the collections of the State Library, along with those of other institutions, have been of assistance to Mrs. Wilcoxen in her work. I can never resist reminding people that we are the largest state library in the nation, and we are the only state library member of the Association of Research Libraries, which is an organization of the largest research libraries in the United States and Canada. And one of our major collection strengths, among many, is New York State and local history in all of its facets. And obviously we're going to be hearing more from our speaker and our panelists about how they have found these materials to be of assistance to them in their work. I don't want to anticipate the remarks of the others, so I will turn the podium over to Melinda Yates, who will introduce our speakers. I would also, before doing that, however, like to thank the Friends for sponsoring this presentation and State Library staff for all their work on the arrangements and logistics today. So Melinda Yates, now take over.
Yeah, yes, it's really an honor to introduce Charlotte. This year happens to be the 25th anniversary of the State Library's move from the Education Department to the Cultural Education Center. Silence. And I think that on a more personal level, the really exciting thing for me today is that I realized the other night it was also the 25th anniversary of my friendship with Charlotte. I first met Charlotte in 1978, the same year that we are celebrating this institutional anniversary. And certainly the latter is today much more to the forefront in my mind. And I realized that it was in 1978, I met Charlotte about 3 years after she had first, when she lived in New Mexico, contacted Paul Huey about his discoveries in his excavation of Fort Orange. And she wrote to him and asked to see him. And he said, yes, please. And it was the beginning of a very long-standing friendship between Charlotte and Paul, and the start of a very rich and pivotal period in both their research on Dutch Albany and Dutch ceramics and Dutch trade. And so it's at the same time, Charlotte also enjoyed the support and friendship of Charles Gehring, Peter Christoph, Norman Rice, and Rod Blackburn. And these are our panelists today who are going to join in a conversation with Charlotte about her work. In 1987, Charlotte's seminal book, which was published by the Albany Institute of History and Art, appeared. It was called Dutch Trade and Ceramics in 17th Century America. That same year, Charlotte Wilcoxen was named one of the State Library's first research residents. And it was largely, but not totally, because of this book. So I feel I've been at the beginning in some way, and I've had very little to do with it. But I am particularly happy to have the focus of this evening, this afternoon's event, that period of Charlotte's life, which I shared with her. This afternoon, Charlotte and her friends and research colleagues have reunited and will share with us their really exhilarating story, I'm not kidding, of discovery and collaboration. A collaboration noteworthy for the tenacity, talent, and generosity, not only of our guests, but of our panelists. And I have already spoken of the panelists. I'm going to mention them again briefly. Roderick Blackburn, author and historian of Dutch architecture and material culture, who gave such a wonderful talk at the Spring Friends meeting about his new book, Dutch Colonial Homes. And Peter Christoph, who was the former head. For those here in the audience, there are so many familiar faces that I feel that I'm probably talking to everyone who knows what I'm saying. But Peter Christoph is the former head of the New York State Library's Manuscripts and Special Collections section. Charles Gehring is the director of the New Netherland Project, Paul Huey, the state archaeologist, and Norman Reich, director emeritus of the Albany Institute of History and Art, and also a member of the board of Friends of the State Library. I spoke to Charlotte this morning and described the format of today's program. I mentioned that I would introduce her and be brief, and there was a pause, and she said, "Please be." So let us welcome Charlotte Wilcoxen. Well, Charlotte, would you like to say something?
Yes, I would. Yeah, I always like to say something. Sometimes it's like, you want me to keep sitting, don't you?
If you would rather stand.
I would rather stand.
Okay.
Just
Would you
feel-
rather stand at the podium?
No, no.
Oh, okay, well,
I have,
oh, no, it's there, stand.
I can speak fairly loud.
Yes, okay.
And I have to get untangled. I'm very delighted to be here and talk to the friends of this library because I have always been a friend of it as long as I knew about it. I came to connected in 1931 with my husband because he had a job there with the Municipal Research Bureau there, and we moved. And I'd never heard of Schenectady, couldn't spell it. It tried a very long time. But it proved to be the warmest and nicest town. And I knew within a week or two that I was going to love living in New York because I thought the people were so friendly. And I did love living in New York. And we moved to Albany. I moved to Albany later. And now I love it. And that's why I wanted to come back here when I knew that I was going to be in some sort of residential place, and rather than staying in Cambridge, Massachusetts, where I had lived for 14 years but never seemed to get acquainted with anybody much there. I felt that I wanted to get back to New York because some of my children live here, and I felt that I had more friends here than anywhere else in the world, and I wanted to be with them, and that's why I'm here. I want to talk today about, let's see what I do want to talk about, so many things. I want to talk about the pleasure that a person can get and the the education we could get by having a special hobby, a special something that doesn't concern his work, doesn't concern his business, but something that he can live with all his life and get something out of it was very, very valuable. And when I moved to Schenectady, I knew nothing about the Dutch except that they had been the first people to settle New York. And I was just vague on that. But I began to get interested in the old houses of Schenectady, and then I got interested in the Delft China, I won't call it China because that's the wrong word, the tin Delft ceramics, and through seeing it in museums here in Albany, in the museums here, and especially the Albany Institute of History and Art, which I went to whenever I could. And then I learned about the State Library when I wanted to make some research on all these Dutch things that I was beginning to learn about. And somebody told me about the State Library. And in spite of living in Schenectady and having 2 young children, I managed to make my way over here. My husband soon discovered that I was getting so much good out of coming here and so much pleasure that he told me he would, every now and then he would say he would stay on Saturday with the children and let me come over here and to the library. So that's the way I first got here. And the first person I knew in the library was Miss Brewster, who some of you all might remember. She was a very marvelous head of the reference department. She had a desk right inside the door of the reading room, and she could catch people as they came in and give them all sorts of wonderful advice. During the war, I liked her very much, and I wanted to pay her back for all her help. I didn't know what to do, but we had chickens. We lived out on the farm, and one of my kids had said that we had to have chickens, that he would take care of them if we had them. So I got chickens, and it was a patriotic thing to do because eggs were very scarce for some reason then. And I could bring Miss Brewster some eggs, and every now and then I give her eggs for Miss Brewster. And she was just a wonderful person. And then I got acquainted with other people in the library, and then years later I found Melinda there, and she was one of my best finds in my whole life. And she has helped me more than most anybody I know in research matters. And I want to thank you, Melinda, right now.
We had a good advice.
Anyway, but I want to talk to you first about Paul Huey and his excavation of Fort Orange. When I got back from New Mexico, where I lived for a time, I heard I had been there during his excavation tour, but friends had written me about it. And so I got very interested in it after I began to do more research on Dutch matters here. I was back in Albany, and I could get to the State Library, or near Albany, I wasn't in it. And one day I thought, I'm going to call Paul Huey. Paul tells me it was in 1974, and I called him to ask him if I could see the shards that he had found at Fort Orange, because I collected Dutch Delft by that time, and I wanted to see if there were any, see the Delft shards that I knew he must have found there. And so I telephoned him, and he said just to come down, he would be glad to show them to me. And I went down, and Paul had these shards all ready to show me. And we began to talk about them, and Paul began to talk about his work, and I began to know that Paul was going to be a soulmate, and he always has been. And then at the library, I discovered another person, and that was Peter. And I've always felt that Peter was one of the first people I really got acquainted with there, and I enjoyed that association, though we've been separated for years, haven't we, Peter? And to begin with, everybody here, all the gentlemen around me, have meant something in my learning about Dutch things, which I wanted to do very much. And every one of them, in some way, has helped me. And Charlie Gehring has helped me in many ways with his wonderful translations and himself. And Norman Rice gave me a volunteer job that I was dying for and enjoyed so much at the Albany Institute. I can't even tell you what this gentleman here, Paul Huey, has done for me. It's been so wonderful. And Rod turned out to be a soulmate in his interest in furniture and architecture and almost everything Dutch. And that was what I wanted to have I sort of concentrated on ceramics, but Rod concentrated on the whole of the Dutch culture of New York. And it really is a wonderful culture that has been passed down to this town. And today, in some ways, Albany is, you can see its Dutch beginnings. And I don't think many people realize that who haven't studied the history, the traditions and everything of Dutch. So in May 1980, I decided that when Paul showed me his ceramics, there was one type of thing that he had recognized and I recognized as tin glaze, but it didn't look like Delft, the famous tin glaze ware of Holland. And it looked somewhat like Delft, but instead of having the glaze, the beautiful Delft glaze, white and blue glaze, it had that on the front of the plate, and on the back it had a lead glaze, which is a transparent glaze that lets everything show through that's behind it. On the bottoms of the plate, it was always a lead glaze, and on the front it was a white glaze of the tin oxide. And Paul and I both wondered why this was from Delft, and when it had been made in Holland, whether it was before or after Delft. And we wondered about many things, and Paul had been in contact with Ivanhoe Hume in Williamsburg, and he was a very fine archaeologist, and he was wondering about the same thing. And they had talked about it in letters, and I had never seen it until Paul showed it to me, but I got very interested in it. And I found that because I couldn't read Dutch, I Charlie, I needed to know more about it than I could find out the books. I did find one book here at the library. It seemed to be a very good book on the subject, but it was in Dutch. And I finally managed with a dictionary, to read most of the captions under the pictures, which helped me a lot. Except in those days, when the book was published, they didn't have the kind of pictures they have today. So they didn't help too much. But I got some sort of idea that I must learn about what this was. And I didn't think I would ever do it by reading books. So I said to Paul one day, Paul, I think I'm going to go to Holland and talk to museum people there about Delft, because everybody in Holland, I'd been there before, just my husband and I went, and I knew that everybody in Holland spoke English perfectly, without an accent, even bus drivers. So I felt that I could get what I wanted to know from the museum people and the archaeologists in Amsterdam. And Paul thought it was a good idea, didn't you? So in May of 1980, I took plane for Holland. And I had a hostess there who was the mother of my daughter's Dutch husband, who was very nice to me and said I could stay with her. And she met me at the airport and took me home with her. And that was on Sunday that I arrived. And on Monday morning, she took me in her car to the train to catch the train to Leeuwarden, which is a very interesting town and I believe it's the capital of Friesland. Friesland is the northernmost province in Holland, and it's very different from other provinces because it's an agricultural province almost altogether. But they have some very beautiful, two wonderful museums there, and I've been corresponding and made some appointments there. So I took the train, went up, and first went to the Prinsessenhof Museum there, which is a museum that specializes in early Chinese export ware. And the director turned out to be an Englishwoman who invited me to spend the night with her very nicely and was very pleasant. And Paul had made me, pages and pages of Xerox productions of the shards that we were interested in, finding out what they were. But they seemed not to be Delft, but they seemed very much like Delft. And he made me sheets and sheets to take over of these Xeroxes. And I was so proud of it. And I said to her, I brought a great many Xeroxes of the shards of this particular thing that I'm interested in knowing about for you to see. And she said, if anyone brings me shards, I would be glad to look at them, but I don't care to look at pictures. Well, that is true. You can't make a final judgment on any piece of ceramic ware by looking at pictures. But on the other hand, these shards have beautiful designs on them, and designs in between Delft and what this turned out to be, which is called Dutch Mallorca rather than Delft, which preceded Delft, which was introduced by Italian tin glazed potters into the northern part of Europe, which had never had such white dishes before. And it's a very, very important thing to know about. And that's what I finally learned from them in Holland. I stayed in Friesland for 2 days, and on the second day, Peter Tiefelaar, who was head of a big factory that had many years, since 1660, been owned by the same family, and made reproductions of this ceramic thing that I was interested in. And Peter Tiefelaar was a great collector of the old Dutch Mallorca rather than Delft. And he sent his secretary to Leeuwarden, and she picked me up and took me back to him. He was recovering from a bad automobile accident. He lived alone in a very nice old house, and we spent the whole day talking. He got up, he's on crutches, and he made us a short lunch. We drank a good deal of sherry, and we talked about what he was telling me all about how it was made. It wasn't Delft, it was made very early, and I won't go into it because I'm not here to talk about ceramics, but it was very, very interesting. And he also told me about Pico Passo, who was an Italian who had written a book in 1548 about how to make this. So he taught me all about it, really, and what it was, and what its cultural status in Holland was, which was the forerunner of Delft, which of course is a great thing. But the original tradition came from the Italians who had made Mallorca for a long time, and the patterns were Italian patterns, whereas the Dutch had finally discovered Chinese export porcelain, and then all the patterns of Delft, which came later, it was mostly Chinese. So those two different ceramic forms had different traditional patterns. And that's one way that you can date them too. And so I learned a great deal about them. Anyway, the next day, I went to see Peter Tickler. Well, I told you about him, and he was a great help indeed. Then Paul had written me about Jan Bart, who was the archaeologist of Amsterdam. So I called him, but I couldn't get in touch with him. Finally, I did get in touch with him, found him wonderful help. And Paul had never met him, he'd been corresponding with him for years. But I found him most helpful, and he became a personal friend, and we wrote back and forth for a long time. And he helped to learn what I wanted to know. And then I went to the Priestman Museum. That was one I didn't know about when I went there and had no contacts, but one of the people I consulted told me about it. Another day, I went to Rotterdam Museum, the Boymans van Berneken Museum in Rotterdam. Rotterdam during the war had been bombed by both, I believe, by both Germans and Allies. The Germans bombed it first before they took it over, I think. And then the Allied people bombed the Germans, who were using it as a place to take off to conquer England in their ships. And they never did it, of course, but that was what the plan was, and that's why the Allies bombed it. And some of the people were very bitter at us for bombing it, and some of the people who lived there. Anyway, it turned out to be a wonderful place to find out what I wanted to know, and a very nice woman. Norman Rice, incidentally, I had asked, when I knew that I was going to take this trip, I'd asked Norman if he would write letters to about 5 museums saying that a member of the staff, I wasn't really a member of the staff, Norman had to be a member of the staff, nobody I thought, for the letters, and he wrote it, and they were very good letters, very short and very succinct. And everybody replied and said, yes, they would be very happy to help me. So I went over that way, feeling that I was already sort of in there. And Rotterdam, the woman there was absolutely marvelous. She was just getting ready to retire, and she'd been there since before World War II. And she told me all sorts of interesting things, in addition to telling me more about this Dutch mejolica that I was interested in. She told me about, during the war, every morning after the bombings, she and other members of the staff, they were all young men, would go out with baskets and search the rubble from the bombings had turned up for shards. And they found loads and loads and loads of shards that way. Now, you archaeologists will think that's sort of a bad way to exit. It turned out to be wonderful because they have one of these wonderful collections of shards. And we talked about it all morning, and then we had lunch, and then she took me into this room. It was a huge room, and it had a very high ceiling. And there were shelves all up and down the ceiling, and there were ladders, very tall ladders that we could move around wherever we wanted to, and look into these shelves. And they had drawers. The shelves were filled with drawers about, I would say, a yard square, very shallow drawers, and all of these drawers were filled with shards of this Dutch mejolica that I'd come there to find out what it was. And she showed me the ladder, and she had a little table and desk, a little desk and a chair down too. But she said, you can get on the ladder, and she showed me where I would find 17th century and the 16th century and things like that shards. And went, said, I'm going to leave you here and you can stay as long as you want to. And if you see any shards that you would like to have photographed, just put them aside and bring them to me later. And we will photograph them and send them to you in Auburn, in America. So that's what I did. I sat there for 2.5 hours on a ladder, about 10 feet up from the floor. And it was not really comfortable sitting there. But I was so excited by all of this. Paul would have been too, and I kept wondering how I could ever tell him all the things I had found. And it was just a wonderful day there. And they made me feel so happy. And after Rotterdam, I went to Den Haag, which is The Hague, and the museum there. Mrs. Deneve, who was one of the women at Rotterdam, told me to look up a man there named Dr. Westers, and they had, incidentally, they had whole plates that had never been broken, 8 there of this manyolic, which is very rare, and which bring the Dutch manyolic that is whole and has never been broken into shards is extremely expensive. They pay thousands of dollars for it, for a plate. And the shards themselves are very large. Now our shards are almost always small because they're taken from plow zones and places like that that have been gone over and over and over. But the shards there often come from the canals. People dump their garbage and trash apparently very early in the canals of Holland. And they can be found practically all together, but in very large shards. And people put them together with a little filling in now and then, and they can be almost original and new, but they are greatly so. I went to Leiden, I think, but I don't remember that at all. But wherever I went, people were extremely interested. Everybody except the lady at the concession was extremely interested in Paul's pictures that he had made from the shards, and really went into it deeply. They would tell me which ones they thought were the most interesting, all they knew about that particular design and everything. And they made a great help, those pictures were. And so I got over my myth. I went to bookshops. I don't know whether I'm talking too long.
No, never. I have to be brief, you don't. I have to be brief, you don't. Please go on.
Anyway, can you hear me all right?
Yes.
And I have these notes because I wanted to get things in as the way I did them then. Rented the bookshops and bought books for Rod and Paul that he asked me to. Do you remember that, Paul and Rod? I've forgotten about it.
Probably cursed trying to bring them home.
Anyway, then I went to a dealer in antiques who happened to have a hobby. It's the same thing I was interested in, this Dutch manyolica. And he gave me some shards to bring home. Just gave them to a great big shards that I would never find here as big. And I brought quite a few of them home. They cherished them for years. I finally gave them to a museum. But anyway, I just had a wonderful trip. And I came home and finally I had time to, with all my traveling around seeing things, I had time to write Paul, and I wrote him a 4-page letter, I think, telling him how single-space incidentally on what a wonderful time I've had and how much I wished he was there. have it with me. And so then I... And so that was my trip. I learned exactly what we wanted to know. I was told it over and over again by all these places I went to. And I felt that I really had a good idea of it and could pass it on to the people who needed it. And that was Paul Hughes for one. And I felt that I had really had a worthwhile trip. And that was it was very good to feel that way. Now, I wanted to talk a bit about Mr. Van Leer, who long before Charlie came, was hired by the library to work on its wonderful documents in Dutch, the early Dutch documents that are here. And I found a plate in Norman's museum. I wanted to see what the description.
Charlotte, that's for 1 second.
What did?
You got it on Lark Street, didn't you?
I beg pardon?
You got it on Lark Street, didn't you?
Yes, I got it on Lark.
Do you want to mention the amount?
$1.
Okay.
Yes, that's exactly what And so I
And for any of you who don't know, Linda Norman's museum has the audience to do.
I love that play. It's so interesting. And that was one of the things that I wanted to talk to Mr. Van Leer about, because there's two Dutch words on it. And nobody that I talked to who knew Dutch, who knew anything about Dutch, could tell me what it meant, the two words. I can't remember them now. I think it was V-O-O or M-I-E-T. I'm not sure about that, but anyway, those were the two Dutch words. Charlie, I should expect you to understand what they are. Anyway, I couldn't find anybody, and I thought maybe Mr. Van Leer could, but he couldn't, as it turned out. So we still are a mystery to me. But anyway, I got acquainted with him, and he was the most wonderful. What I immediately thought of, here at last is a scholar and a gentleman. He was so definitely that. And he was very happy to talk to me. He retired, and I think he was lonely to talk about things of that sort. And I was obviously eager to find out about it, everything he could tell me. And I remember he came out and had tea at ours in the country one Sunday and we talked all afternoon. He arrived early, we met him down at Amsterdam at the bus, and he talked about the Capitol fire and finding the documents lying, even some of them outside on the ground and in the street, all of them very wet because they were the fire, putting out the Capitol fire that had been set. Somebody putting a cigarette in a wastebasket. I don't know really how it was set. That burned up some of the very, very wonderful documents that you have in the Dutch, and damaged a great many others that needed a lot of restoration. And Charlie is having to work with these now, and knows the frustration of finding some of them gone for good. And it was a very tragic thing, really, about the history of the Dutch in this area. And I think that's just about all I have to talk about.
Well, why don't we let Paul continue?
What do you
Why don't we let Paul pick up on what you talked about and what the actual importance is, time went on, of the discovery of
Well, I think that sometime Paul should have should tell you all about the drama of Fort Orange, of his getting to investigate. It's a great story, and it's very important his explanation of Fort Orange really started most of this later interest in the Dutch that has been so helpful to the family, I think, because they last appreciate their heritage, cultural heritage, and it's still English here, as I said before, in subtle ways, and some of you are descended from them, and I just like to talk about it. But Paul was the one that got me started on this, and I have always remembered that, and always been thankful for it. And can you think of anything else I ought to talk about? That I could talk about? I can't. I want to hear from some of these.
Charlotte, didn't you come home from the Netherlands?
I beg pardon?
Didn't you come home on one of your trips with a plate in your suitcase?
Yes, I came home with 10 plates. No, not that. Rod and I did that. In 1983, all of this, when I got there, I should tell you this, and started telling them about how interested some of the people in all the war in the Dutch and trying to find out about it. The people there, the historical people and the archaeologists, Jan Barton, Paul had been working on it, but most of them didn't know that anybody here was interested in the Dutch. They knew it was a very odd thing, and that made them understand that we were very interested in the Dutch period and in what the Dutch had done for the culture of Albany to establish a culture.